Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is going to be my review for Turn Season 1, Episode 4, Eternity How Long. And I was completely bored by this episode. This was just a bland, blah, nothing much happening type of episode, just pretty much a filler episode, and I was really disappointed, because they were going in a great direction in the last episode. I don't know what happened in this episode, but this episode just, nothing really that interesting happened to me. I didn't really like anything in this episode. And you know what? The thing was, they got rid of the two most interesting characters, two of the most interesting storylines from the last episode weren't even in this episode. Anna was not in this episode, and I loved her storyline in the last episode, because as we know, she lied to Abe about Simcoe dying, so I really want to see where that went. And we didn't get to see that because she wasn't in the episode, and Simcoe himself wasn't in the episode. So I feel like that's really what ruined the episode, and the episode just as a whole was just really, really boring. And I was not really into it at all, so I guess we'll just get to it, because I was really bored by this episode. The beginning of this episode, I did like. I will say that. The beginning of this episode, I enjoyed it. Basically, in the Setauket Church Cemetery, Abe, Mary, and Richard are gathering at the grave of Abe's brother Thomas for a memorial, and Abe recalls when Thomas comforted him at their mother's funeral. Basically, you know, they're seeing him dying, they're going to his grave and everything, and I thought that was overall a good scene. Nearby redcoats flog the waterfront sentries, including Ensign Baker, as Hewlett admonishes them for letting a scout, Caleb, escape. Because as you remember, you know, Abraham told Caleb that he had to get out of there, so. Then, you know, convinced that the scout portends a rebel attack, he contemplates ways to bolster the garrison and eyes the gravestones. So they basically want to get rid of the gravestones. So at the Continental Army's flying camp, Caleb gives Abe a report on the Heistons' impending march to Trenton to Bend, noting that Abe came through. So in the church, Hewlett outlines his plan to use cemetery gravestones to fortify the garrison, and Richard objects, calls it a discretion, and Hewlett gives them 3 days to decide on 10 gravestones to be removed. Ben presents Abe's report to General Scott, and urges him to share the intelligence with General Washington. So when Ben and Caleb refuse to reveal their source to Abe, you know, Scott dismisses the intelligence as unsigned and unverified and burns the report. And if you can tell, you know, there's really nothing interesting happening at this point, especially, like, the first 20 minutes of this episode are completely boring. There's nothing happening. Abe warns Richard that the towns will turn against him if he helps Hewlett remove family gravestones. He urges Richard to allow the town to turn against Hewlett, and Richard ignores his advice. My thing is here, what the fuck happened to Richard's cauliflower thing? What happened to the tension between Richard and Abe in the last episode? There was a lot of tension between them in the last episode. I love where they were going with the last episode. They didn't even address that in this episode, and I was really pissed off. I really was. Just seriously. So that's really what bothered me about this episode, was that everything that we got in the last episode was not even continued in this one. So, in a boarding room in a New Jersey tavern, John, Andre, and Philomena rehearse Philomena's cover as Iris, a tavern wench, and Andre reassures her that her target will not suspect her. That night in the same tavern boarding room, Philomena entraps General Charles Lee, the Continental spy that provided the tip about the Connecticut safe house, where Hewlett's men were ambushed, and Andre takes Lee captive. By the way, a lot of sex scenes in this episode, really unnecessary sex scenes here, I thought it was really unnecessary. And then we get a scene with Mary and Abe, whatever, you know, I kind of like this, because I'm wondering where this is going, but Mary kisses Abe and says she wants another baby, and when Abe withdraws, Mary asks what's troubling him, and he agrees to tell her as long as she keeps it a secret. So the next day, Mary performs quitting work with a group of women at the Scudder home, and as they gossip, Mary is tricked into revealing Abe's secret about the gravestones. Just the whole gravestone thing, I didn't find it interesting at all. I really did not. So to the sounds of Philomena screaming in the next room, her screams are fake. She's actually playing cards with Andre's men. That honestly was that was really stupid. We could have had a really big, intense scene there, and it had to be her just faking it and playing cards. I thought that was really stupid. Really bad choice of directing there. And Andre questions Lee at a safe house without revealing that he is the British contact that Lee has been sending his intelligence to. Lee mentions supplying the British with the location of the safe house, and when Andre says the men sent to the safe house were ambushed, Lee insists he knew nothing about the attack. Convinced of Lee's sincerity, Andre reveals his identity. So at the Woodhill farm, Abe looks out the window, sees a mob of townspeople heading towards Whitehall. Mary admits that she let the news about the removal of the gravestone slip. So, you know, kind of intense here. Led by Martin D. John, the mob arrives at Whitehall to confront Richard. Richard promises no stones will be taken without family consent. And momentarily placated, the crowd disperses. Richard crumbles a list of 10 gravestones he had already drawn up. So pretty much they want to get rid of all the gravestones, and I found this whole thing pointless. It's not going to go anywhere. And we knew they weren't going to take away the gravestones or anything. So knowing that Scott only reads the first page of intelligence reports, Caleb suggests tucking Abe's report inside another report in order to smuggle it to Washington. So Richard visits Lucy Shutter, asks her to donate a gravestone to inspire other families. She refuses, calling Hewlett's plan a bad idea. Dijon visits Habe at the farm and threatens to harm Richard. Yes, Dijon. This guy is named after mustard, everybody. Dijon Mustard. Yeah, I just felt like saying that because I really just thought this episode was stupid. Richard, basically, he visits Abe at the farm, threatens to harm Richard in his business. Abe punches him and defends Richard. Kind of an intense scene there, but it just wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. Ben and Caleb are fabricating a scouting report and fold Abe's intelligence report inside. Scott reads the first page of the fake scouting report, declares it worthy of passing on to Washington, and to Ben's relief, Scott does not notice Abe's report tucked inside, and at Whitehall, Richard bemoans the difficulty of his task and requests more time, and Hewlett refuses. Abe informs Mary he's going to Whitehall to tell Richard something that will put a stop to the gravestone business. She's kind of skeptical she's kind of worried that it's going to get him in trouble, obviously, but he tells her he's going to do it anyway. So, at the safe house, Andre says he came by Lee's letter to the President of the Continental Congress, in which he expresses doubts about Washington's suitability as commander. Andre proposes a plan in which Lee heroically escapes, parlays his hero status into a role as the new commander of the Continental Army, and after assuming command, Lee would then urge the Continental Congress to surrender, and Lee entertains the idea. And then the end of the episode, at Whitehall, Richard acknowledges to Abe that Hewlett's plan is folly. Abe counsels Richard to call Hewlett's bluff, lead the townspeople against him, rationalizing that Hewlett doesn't want to lose Tucket. And Richard embraces Abe's words, likens him to his first and favorite son, Thomas. So, he kind of tells him that, even though Thomas is dead, he still does love Abe. Abe's report is delivered to Washington's headquarters and placed on a large table that is stacked high with other reports. And as the Redcoats distribute pickaxes and shovels for their gravestone removal, Dijon distributes muskets to the townspeople, and this is the end of the episode. So at the very end, the Redcoats and townspeople face off in the cemetery, and Richard intervenes and invokes God, and he's urging just the townspeople to make sacrifices, and he says, just as God sacrificed his own son to save us all, the townspeople murmur as Richard starts digging up Thomas's gravestone. Abe watches appalled, the townspeople follow suit, start digging up their family gravestones. Dijon apologizes to Abe and Richard, and Hewlett smugly watches everyone dig, and he tells Lieutenant Appleton that if it's so hard for the townspeople to dig up their family's gravestones, it will be even harder for the rebels from the same region to fire on the stones. This is how you tame a colony. Hewlett says not through battle, but through winning their hearts and minds. So basically, I guess what he's saying is that there's going to be more people dead, and they're going to try to kill more people. Honestly, I don't know, and I don't give a shit, because this episode was really, really boring. All it had to do with was literally gravestones, and it was not what I wanted it to be at all. And again, I think that's because we lost two of the most interesting characters in this episode. That being Anna and Simcoe. Two of the most interesting plots, and they weren't even in the episode. And the other thing was Ben and Caleb, they could have had a good storyline, but they literally had nothing to do in this episode except help Abe, and please, next episode, do not focus on Richard. I think he's an interesting character, and I like his storylines and everything. But his whole thing, he cannot carry an episode. We saw that in this episode. Abe and Richard cannot carry an episode. You need to have more stuff going on in the episode that's a little bit more interesting, and then it'll be fine. But literally, they did not continue anything from the last episode in this episode, and I was really upset by that. Really bored by this episode. And I don't know if you guys were as bored as I was, but again, I expect this episode to be really good compared to the last one. And I really hope that the next one, it does get better. It looks like the next one actually is going to follow Ben and Caleb, and it takes place on Christmas Eve, so I think next week's is probably going to be really intense because we know what happened on Christmas Eve in the Revolutionary War. So I have a feeling next week's episode is going to be really, really good. This episode, it was really boring. It was really a filler episode. There was nothing really that interesting happening in it. It wasn't like it was all about Thomas and everything. It was just all about protecting a gravestone, and I just thought it was honestly just really, really stupid and just not interesting at all. But maybe you guys think differently. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. Just boring episode overall. Nothing much else to say. And, that's it for my review. I hope you enjoyed it. And, is there anything else I want to say? I'm trying to think. What does Hewlett mean by not through battle, but through winning their hearts and minds? What does he exactly mean by that? What do you guys think he means? What's gonna happen with Andre and Philomena? You know, what's gonna happen there? I don't know. Ben and Caleb, they had nothing to do in this episode. Were you surprised by that? That's it for my review. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be my review for Mad Men, which hopefully was a much better episode than Turn. So I'll see you guys for my review of that. But I'm sorry, this was sort of a rant video, but that's it. And check out my live stream of this with Kane LaPlante, aka Kid of Awesome. So definitely check that out. So I will see you guys for my review of that, of Mad Men. So bye.